I've told this story twice, and both times the person looked at me like I was making it up. So I stopped telling it. But it happened, and I know what I saw. So here it is one more time. I was working overnight cashier at Valley Foods in Roanoke. 22, needed the money. The night crew was 3 people total. Me at the front register, a manager named Doug in the back office, and a stalker named Leon on the floor. That's it. 3 people in a 24-hour grocery store at 3 in the morning. Most nights barely anyone came in. A drunk college kid, a nurse heading home, someone who ran out of diapers, maybe 10 customers between midnight and 6. Long, quiet stretches with the fluorescent lights humming and me on my stool reading my phone. Normal. Fine. She came in at 3:08 a.m. on a Tuesday in January. I know the exact time because I just checked my phone, thought about how I had 2 hours and 52 minutes left, and literally 40 seconds later, the door slid open. She was a woman, maybe late 40s, wearing a big coat that looked too large for her. She walked in a little off, not drunk, just slightly too slow, like she was being careful about it. She didn't grab a basket or a cart. She just walked past my register toward the back of the store. I said, "Hi, welcome in." She didn't respond, didn't look over, just kept going. That's not weird at 3 in the morning, people do that. So I went back to my phone. 10 minutes later, she still hadn't come back to the front. I looked up and scanned the floor, couldn't see her anywhere. A little strange, but whatever, people take their time. Another 10 minutes, nothing. Okay, and now I was paying attention. Not scared yet, just paying attention. Someone who comes in without a basket and doesn't come to the register after 20 minutes is either leaving through another door or doing something they shouldn't. It happens. I called Doug on the headset and told him. He said he'd check the cameras and get back to me. While I waited, I kept watching the floor. Leon at the far end doing his section, the bathroom hallway, the produce at the back. No sign of her anywhere. Doug came back and said he couldn't find her on the cameras. I said, "What do you mean you can't find her?" He said he'd gone through 20 minutes of footage from every camera. He could see her walk through the entrance door and pass my register. After that, she wasn't on a single camera. Not the aisles, not the bathrooms, not the back. Nowhere. Let that sink in for a second. She walked into the store. She passed right in front of me. And for the next 20 minutes, not one camera in that building picked her up. It was like she stopped existing the moment she got past my register. I got up. I didn't really have a plan. I just knew I didn't want to keep sitting at the front alone, knowing she was somewhere in that store, and nobody could find her on camera. I walked the aisles, one by one, slowly. Nothing. I got to the back and called out, "Hello, is anyone back here?" in that voice you use when you're trying to sound casual and you are absolutely not casual. Your heart is going fast and your ears are working overtime on every single sound. No answer. I turned into the produce section. She was standing in front of the apples. Back to me, completely still. That big coat just hanging off her. Not reaching for anything, not moving at all. Just standing there. And I don't know how to explain this part, but the moment I saw her, something dropped in my stomach. Not a jump scare, not a sudden fright. More like when you're walking and you realize a second too late that the step you just took wasn't there. That slow, cold dropping feeling. My body knew something was wrong before I could figure out what. I said, "Excuse me, ma'am." She turned around. Her face was just a face. Normal, tired looking, the kind you forget immediately. Nothing about it should have scared me. But when she looked at me, there was nobody looking back. That's the only way I can describe it. You know how when someone looks at you, even a stranger, there's something there, some basic sense of another person being present? She didn't have that. Her eyes were open and pointed in my direction, but there was nothing behind them. Not tired, not distracted, just absent. Like the body was standing there, but whoever was supposed to be inside it had stepped out and forgotten to come back. I stood there trying to think of what to say next. My mouth was dry. Then Leon called out from a few aisles over, asking if I was okay. And in that same second, something shifted in her face. Not an expression, nothing you could point to. Just for one moment, it felt like someone turned a light on behind her eyes, took a quick look at the room, then turned it back off. She looked at me, really looked, for maybe 1 second. Then she walked past me toward the front. I did not follow her right away. I stood in that produce section and tried to get my breathing under control because it had gotten loud and strange, and I didn't want her to hear it. My hands were shaking, and I didn't know what to do with them. I stood there for maybe 15 seconds, just pressing them against the sides of my legs and trying to feel normal again. When I finally went back to my register, she was already gone. The front door was closed. I hadn't heard it open. Doug told me later he caught her on camera walking toward the front, and then nothing, same as before. And then he showed me the part that I still think about. The entrance camera recorded the door opening as she left. The timestamp said 3:08 a.m., the exact same time she had walked in. As far as every camera in that building was concerned, she had entered and exited at the exact same moment. The 30 minutes she spent in that store didn't exist in any record. I worked there 4 more months. Every single shift I thought about that timestamp, about what she was doing in my store for 30 minutes that left no trace, about what she was looking at standing in front of those apples, about that 1 second when something was actually home behind her eyes, and what it means that it was only 1 second. I've thought about it every time I walk through a grocery store at night since then. I always look toward the produce section now. I always check if the person standing in front of the apples is actually looking at them, or just standing there the same way she was. There's a rule that people who grow up in rural Louisiana seem to know without ever being taught. You don't stop in towns you don't recognize after dark. You keep your tank full before the sun goes down. And if somebody flags you down on a back road at night, you keep driving. You don't slow down. You don't roll your window down. You keep your eyes forward and your foot steady on the gas. Nobody told me that rule, and honestly, nobody needed to, because nobody expected me to end up lost on US 84 at 11:30 on a February night, running on fumes and a wrong turn I still can't fully explain. The trip started fine. My buddy Craig's wedding up in Shreveport. Good food, open bar, the kind of night that blurs at the edges in all the best ways. My plan was to drive straight back to New Orleans rather than booking a hotel. 4.5 hours, an easy drive. I'd done it before. Somewhere around Natchitoches, though, my GPS just quit on me. Not the usual dead zone flicker that fixes itself after a mile. The screen went gray and stayed gray, and somewhere in that blind stretch, I made a wrong turn I didn't catch until the road around me looked nothing like anything I'd planned. 2 lanes, no street lights, pine trees pressing in tight on both sides, and the only sign of civilization was the occasional weathered mailbox disappearing in my rear view. The first gas station appeared around 11:15. A small place with no chain name, no logo, just a hand-painted white sign that said "Fuel" in faded red letters. 2 pumps under a single overhead bulb. The kind of place that feels like it exists slightly outside of time. A man was standing beside the near pump. Like, he wasn't pumping gas. He wasn't doing anything, really. Just standing there with his arms crossed, watching the road. When my headlights swept over him, he didn't move. Didn't blink, didn't wave, didn't look away. He just watched me drive past. Now, I know that's not inherently strange. People stand outside. People zone out. But there was something about the absolute stillness of him. The way he showed zero reaction to a car pulling up in the dead of night, that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up in that old animal way. The way your body knows something before your brain does. My gauge was showing a quarter tank, enough to keep going. So I kept going. 15 minutes later, my GPS was still dark. The tank was edging toward an 1/8, and the math was getting uncomfortable. Then the road curved, and there was another station ahead. Bigger this time. A proper metal canopy over 4 pumps. A small convenience store attached on the right. A red open sign glowing in the window. It looked completely normal. The kind of place you'd pull into without a second thought on a Tuesday afternoon. So I pulled in, parked at the second pump, stepped out, and immediately felt it. Something about the air was wrong. I know how that sounds, and I'm not sure how else to describe it, but you know how a gas station at night usually sounds? The low hum of the lights, maybe a radio bleeding through from inside, some distant highway noise. This one had the hum and the glow, but everything else was gone. No sound from the store, no traffic on the road, no wind in the trees. The silence had a weight to it, like pressure building behind the ears. The card reader accepted my card. The pump started. I stood there watching the numbers and telling myself I was just tired from the long drive. Then the store door opened. A woman came out, maybe 60, heavy-set, moving with surprising purpose for her age. She walked straight across the lot toward me without hesitating and stopped about 4 feet away, close enough that I could see her face clearly under the pump light. "You don't want to stay here long," she said. Not loud, not a whisper, just direct. The voice of someone saying exactly what they mean. "Just stopping for gas," I told her. "I'll be out in a minute." She glanced at the pump, then back at me, and her expression didn't change. "There's a man who works this stretch of road," she said. "Has been for years. He waits for people traveling alone at night, strangers who don't know the area, people whose cars look out of place." She paused for just a beat. "Last August, a young woman stopped here by herself, came inside to use the restroom." Another pause. "We found her car still at the pump the next morning." The nozzle clicked. Full tank. My hands were already moving, pulling the card, replacing the nozzle, reaching for the gas cap, before my brain had even fully processed what she'd said. "Get back on 84 East," she said. "Don't exit until you see the overpass for I-49. Between here and there, don't stop. Not for a red light, not for someone standing in the road, not for anything. You just keep driving." I looked at her face. there was something in it I keep coming back to even now. Not panic, not drama, something quieter and heavier than that. The look of someone who has tried to explain the same thing too many times and long since stopped expecting it to land. What about you? The question came out before I thought about it. Is it safe here? For you? Something shifted in her expression. Not quite fear, but something older than fear, something closer to resignation. I know how to handle it, she said. Then she turned, walked back inside, and the door closed behind her. The lock turned. In all that silence, the sound was very loud. I got back in my car and pulled out onto 84 East. Foot down, music off. Just me and the road and the dark pressing in from both sides. The next 40 minutes were the longest of my life. Every set of headlights coming the other way made my chest tighten. Every gap in the tree line looked like somewhere a person could stand and wait. Around the 20-minute mark, my GPS flickered back to life. The little blue arrow reappearing like nothing had happened, like it hadn't just left me blind out there for an hour. I almost laughed out loud. The I-49 overpass came up, and I took the exit without slowing down. Back in New Orleans around 2 in the morning, I sat in my car in the parking garage for a solid 10 minutes before I could make myself go inside. I don't really know why. I just needed to sit there and let everything settle. I told the story a few times in the weeks after. Friends listened, offered the reasonable explanations. A local woman who'd seen too much, rural Louisiana being what it is, an overactive imagination after a long night on the road. All probably true, all reasonable. But here's the part that hasn't left me. About 3 weeks after that drive, I came across a short news item. A man's body had been found in a drainage canal off US 84 in Wynn Parish. The right stretch of road, the right window of time. No identification. Cause of death undetermined. 2 paragraphs on a local news site. The kind of story that doesn't travel far. That part's probably coincidence. The part that isn't. When I got curious and looked up the gas station, the one with the canopy, 4 pumps, the red open sign, I found that there are only 3 stations on that section of US 84 between Natchitoches and the I-49 interchange. None of them are open past 9 p.m. None of them have been open past 9 p.m. for at least 4 years. And not one of them is run by a woman. I've driven a lot of long roads since that night, but I've never gone back through that stretch of Louisiana. And whenever my tank starts running low after dark, I always think about that pump light and that woman's face and that lock turning in the silence. I fill up every time before the sun goes down.
My name is Simone. I did overnight security at Meridian Superstore in Baton Rouge for 5 months, and I want to be honest about something right away. I am still not okay with what I saw. People ask me if I'm over it, and the answer is no. It's been 14 months, and the answer is still no. Some things you don't get over. You just get used to carrying them. The job was simple. 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., solo. My station was a small desk near the customer service counter at the front of the store, with 2 monitors showing the feeds from all 31 cameras. The store was closed. Nobody came in. My job was to watch the screens, do 2 physical walkthroughs per shift, call the police if anything happened. Simple. What I'm about to tell you started on a Thursday in March, my 9th week on the job. I'd done my first walkthrough. settled back at my desk around midnight, and was watching the feeds the way I always did, cycling through them in sets of 6. Everything empty. The long, fluorescent lit aisles, the dark deli counter, the produce section, the big empty parking lot out front. Quiet. Normal. I was on the second rotation of cameras when I stopped. Something was different on camera 14. Camera 14 covered the middle section of the store, aisles 8 through 11. I was looking at it, and everything seemed normal. But there was a feeling, the kind you can't immediately name, that something in the frame was not the same as it had been 30 seconds ago when I'd last looked. I switched camera 14 to the main screen and stared at it. Aisle 9. Canned goods. Empty. I kept staring. And then I saw it. Halfway down the aisle, just at the edge of where the light from the overhead fluorescents started to thin out before the next bank kicked in. A gap. A shadow that was slightly darker and slightly more vertical than the shadows around it. A person-shaped shadow that had not been there before. My first thought was, someone got locked in. It happens. I got on the radio, called it in to the overnight manager on duty who worked remotely, told him I had a possible person in aisle 9. He told me to do a physical check. I grabbed my flashlight and walked to the store. Aisle 9 was empty. I stood in the middle of it and swept the flashlight down both ends. Shelving, product, floor. Nobody. I checked the aisles on either side. Nobody. I checked the bathrooms, the back room, the fire exits. The fire exits were all sealed, the alarmed doors untouched. There was nobody in the store. I went back to my desk and pulled up camera 14. The shadow was back. Same spot. Same shape. Standing in the thin part of the light halfway down the aisle, not moving. I watched it for 2 minutes without moving myself. My hand was on the radio, and I hadn't made a decision yet about what to say into it. What do you say? There's a shadow on a camera that wasn't there before, and I just checked that aisle and it was empty. Then I had an idea. If there was a person standing in aisle 9, they would show up on the adjacent camera too. Camera 13 covered aisles 6 through 8, and its field of view included the end of aisle 9. I switched to camera 13. The end of aisle 9 was clearly visible in the bottom right corner of the frame. Empty. I switched back to camera 14. The shadow was right there in the middle of the aisle. The same aisle. Visible on one camera. Invisible on the camera 10 feet away. That was the moment something in my chest went very wrong. Not fear, exactly, not yet. More like the feeling of a floor giving slightly under your foot. That fraction of a second where you're not sure if it's going to hold. My brain was running hard trying to find an explanation and coming up with nothing. And the nothing was worse than anything it could have found. I called the remote manager back and told him what I was seeing. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said he was pulling up the camera feeds from his end. He came back on and said he could see camera 14 clearly. He said there was nothing in aisle 9. I was looking at camera 14 on my screen. The shadow was right there. Halfway down the aisle, vertical, person-shaped, not moving. I said, "Are you sure? I'm looking at it right now. There's something in aisle 9. He said his screen showed an empty aisle. We were both looking at the same camera at the same time. He saw an empty aisle. I saw a shadow that had no explanation. I don't know how long the silence lasted after that. Long enough that he asked if I was still there. I said yes. He said he'd flag it for the tech team in the morning, that it was probably a display glitch on my monitor, that I should do another physical check to confirm the store was clear, and then just keep monitoring. I did the physical check. Aisle 9 was empty. I went back to my desk. I looked at camera 14. The shadow was still there. And here is where I need to slow down and tell you exactly what happened next. Because I have replayed this in my head so many times that I need to get the sequence right. I was sitting at my desk, looking at the shadow on camera 14. It had been there for almost 40 minutes at that point. Not moving, not doing anything, just standing in the middle of the aisle. Then it turned. Not walked. Not disappeared. Turned, the way a person turns when they decide to face a different direction. Slow. Deliberate. It had been facing down the aisle, and then it turned. And when it finished turning, it was facing the camera. Facing camera 14 directly. My chair rolled back about 2 feet before I realized I'd pushed it. I was gripping the edge of the desk. My mouth was open, and no sound was coming out. Whatever part of me was supposed to be in charge of making decisions had completely stopped working. It stood there, facing the camera for maybe 10 seconds. Then it raised one arm, slowly, the way you raise your hand to wave. And it waved. At the camera. At me. I do not remember standing up. I remember being at the desk. And then I remember being at the far end of the customer service counter, near the exit. And there is just nothing in between those two memories. My body must have moved without me. I called the remote manager, and I told him what I had seen, and I told him I was not staying in that building. He tried to talk me through it, told me it was a monitor malfunction, told me to calm down. I told him I was leaving and I left. I sat in my car in the parking lot for about 20 minutes, shaking. Shaking like the kind you can't control, where your hands do it without you, and you press them together, and they just keep going. I had the doors locked and the engine running, and I was watching the front entrance of the store and trying to talk myself into believing it was a screen glitch. I went back in and got my bag. I did not look at the monitors. I quit the next day. The tech team checked the monitor. They said there was nothing wrong with it. No display errors, no glitches, no explanation for what I'd seen. The remote manager signed off on the report saying the incident was inconclusive. Inconclusive. I've worked security jobs since then. Different buildings, different cities. But I have never once sat down in front of a camera monitor at night without thinking about aisle 9. Without thinking about the thing that was visible on one camera and invisible on the camera right next to it. Without thinking about it, turning around slowly to face the lens and raising its hand and waving like it knew exactly who was watching. Like it had been waiting for me to notice it all along.